Aloha and welcome to this screencast where I am going to take you on a guided tour of Google Project Hosting. So what we're going to do is we're going to start off and we're going to visit an existing Google Project Hosting project called Robocode PMJ Decruiser. I want to show you the home page, the source pages, wikis, a little bit about how you administer a Google hosted project. And then I'm going to show you how to download an existing project, in particular the Robocode PMJ Decruiser project, to your local workspace using Subversion and with commit access, which means that you can make a little change to the project and then upload it. And just a friendly reminder that that's one of the assignments for this module, is to check out the Robocode PMJ Decruiser project with commit privileges, make a small little change, and then upload it again. I'm also going to show you the the standard process that we want to use here, which is to, when you've downloaded or checked out a project or even just updated any of the files, the first thing you always want to do is run the verify target to make sure that the state of the system as it exists at the time that you got it is functional. Then you make your change. Then you run verify one more time to make sure that you haven't broken anything, and then you upload. Finally, we'll spend a little time creating a new project, which is another assignment for this week, and how you set up the Google project, do a little bit of configuration, upload some files using Subversion, and so forth. So this is a pretty action-packed module. I suspect you'll want to kind of look at it a few times and follow along as you go through this assignment. Okay, so that's enough of PowerPoint. Let's switch over to the browser where I want to show you the Robocode PMJ Decruiser project. Now, you've been using this project for a while, right? I've been showing you the downloads directory and you've been getting it. But you maybe haven't paid too much attention to the overall structure. And so I want to spend a little time with that now, because you'll find that setting up hosted projects makes a qualitative difference in your ability to develop software collaboratively. That's the whole point of going to this approach now, is it's going to make it easy for others to work with you, others in your class or others across the world, to work with you to develop software. Probably prior to this class, if you wanted to work with someone else, you were probably emailing them files, and even if you work on different machines at home, you have problems because the files on one of your computers isn't the same as the files on the other computer. Once you get used to using a hosting site like Google Project Hosting or SourceForge or GitHub, you'll find that it just dramatically improves the speed and the efficiency and the simplicity of developing software. So the idea is we're going to host in the cloud our files, our documentations, our distributions, and so forth, and that way you can get to it anywhere. Okay, so here's the Google Project Hosting Robocode PMJ Decruiser project. You can see it has a home page, and on this initial page that comes up, you should provide some information about your project. Now, in the case of Robocode, the best thing to put on the home page is a description of the strategy that's being used by that particular robot. Screen dumps of a robot generally aren't that helpful with respect to Robocode, but for other projects, it's usually quite useful to have some kind of screen dumps or other kinds of information. Let me quickly show you another project called HackyStat that's been developed in my lab, and you can see there's all sorts of things that can be done. You can insert little OLO tags that provide automated metrics about how many people have been working in your system, the cost, and so forth. You can embed YouTube videos. You can put links to other kinds of information and so forth. So there's a lot of stuff you can do in your home page. With respect to this initial project, you can keep it pretty simple, but I would like you to document the strategy. Now, there's some other tabs here in this front page that are interesting to look at. The updates page shows you a list of all the changes that have been made to this particular project. That can be really useful to understand what's going on. There's a people page that shows the people associated with the project and their role. As you can see, all of you in this are now committers in this project, which means that you can check out and commit changes to this system. Downloads directory you've seen before. That's a place where you can anybody can go to download distributions of the system. There's a wiki page, and that allows you to create documentation pages. Okay, and generally two of the more important kinds of pages is a guide for users. Okay, in the case of this particular project, it's pretty darn trivial what you do as a user. You just kind of download the package, and then you find the jar file and you plunk it into the robots directory, and you're pretty much good to go. Usually the user guide will be much more complicated than this, obviously. Going back to the wiki, we also have a developer's guide. This is a little more complicated because in general you want to explain to developers what the prerequisites are for using your system. What kinds of libraries and tools do they need to have installed? In our case, we want Ant and Java 1.6 and then kind of how you install and run the system. And so here we document the fact that after you check out the sources, the first thing you need to do is run Ant, because that's going to download Ivy in the libraries, right? And then run this ant-f verify. Actually, you could combine those two because the verify will depend upon these other things. And then some hints about development guidelines. So, I explained that we use Eclipse, and so there's a formatting file for Eclipse that allows the source code to be in the correct format, and making sure that the verify build target is executed before you commit changes. So again, the developer guide in many cases is going to grow to be much more complicated than this, but this kind of shows you some of the basic stuff. There's an Issues tab that allows you to specify the defects or enhancements that you've discovered during development and communicate them to other developers. We'll get back to that later. There's this Administer tab, which you'll want to spend some time with because it allows you to configure the project when you're setting up a new one. So here's where we provide the text that appears on the home page, and you can see it uses this thing called Wiki Markup, or sometimes called Markdown. And that's a very simplified version, kind of in a sense, of HTML, or at least it's post-processed and converted to HTML. And so you can see that when you want to create links, you use this square bracket notation. To make things boldface, you use little stars. Okay, so there's, instead of the whole angle bracket A tag and the kind of complicated HTML syntax, you've got this very simple syntax. One of the things I want to point out to you right away is that the Wiki Syntax includes this idea that if there are words with internal capitalization, it's going to interpret that as a reference to another wiki page. Okay, so if it sees a word like decruiser, it's going to look in the wiki area of this website to see if there is a page called decruiser and create a link to that. If it doesn't find a page that looks like that, it's going to put a little question mark link after this word, indicating that it's an unknown reference it's a reference to a wiki page that hasn't yet been created. Okay, they thought this was a great feature, I think, when they originally designed it. I think it's a tremendous bug, because what you have to do in order to avoid that question mark being created is essentially escape the word by putting an exclamation point before it. Now, it turns out that in Java development, you've got words with internal capitalization like all over the place, which means that when you use these wiki pages, you've got to put exclamation points in front of lots and lots of text in these documentation pages in order to get rid of that question mark, and in order to indicate that you're not just missing a wiki page, you actually are just referencing a word that has internal capitalization. I will mark down if I find any wiki pages that you've created that include the question marks. Okay, so please note, it's very simple. I mean, what you essentially have to do is you write your wiki page, you save it, you then look at the wiki page, check for any question marks, and then go back and do the editing. It's darn near impossible to remember all of the exclamation points when you're writing the text. At least I've never been able to do it successfully. I always have to go and check the wiki page afterwards to see if there are any question marks and then go ahead and edit it. Okay, but it's very important. it looks very unprofessional and bad to look at a wiki page with all these question marks all the way through it. So just take that additional step to review the wiki pages that you create, get rid of those question marks, and everything will be fine. You'll notice there's a little link here. If you want to find out more about Wiki Markup, you can click that, and it gives you this. That tells you a little bit more about how things work, but you want to go to this more examples. That gives you the whole shoot and match. Okay, doesn't take long to actually learn this Wiki Markup. Maybe 10-15 minutes at the most. It's not that big a deal. Okay, let me now go to the Source tab and show you that you can, for example, browse the source code. So we can click into the Subversion directory. By default, it will always set up these 4 subdirectories in the SVN directory for each project. The trunk directory is the one that we're mostly interested in, and you can see that it shows you all the top level files in that directory, and it also provides shows you any subdirectories of that directory over here. You can see that in the trunk directory we have references to our top level files and the source directory. We do not have reference to the lib directory. We do not have reference to the build directory. We do not have reference to the bin directory. Okay, so if you create projects and you inadvertently upload the build, bin, or lib directories, you've got to delete them. Okay, it's not a big deal. You just have to make sure that you don't have those directories in your distribution, because those are derived directories. They're created from these source documents. Okay, so you don't want them under configuration management control. The other thing to note about this trunk directory is the trunk directory does not contain a directory called robocode pmj decruiser, and in it all of these files. Okay, that's another common mistake that beginners make, is in the trunk directory they have a single directory that contains the rest of their files. Don't do that. The trunk directory should always be the top level of your project. Okay, that looks pretty good. Okay, so the next thing I want to do, I'm just checking to make sure I've told you everything I want to tell you about this, and I think I have. And if I haven't, I'll send out an email later. So that kind of concludes the guided tour of this particular project. I think you should definitely go here and kind of click around and get familiar with it. The next thing I want to do is show you how you can check out these files to a local directory such that you can make changes and then commit them later. Okay? So how are we going to do that? The way that we're going to do that is by bringing up a Subversion client. Okay, now before, remember, we downloaded from the downloads directory and then we unzipped it and we could edit, we could get at these files without any kind of special tool. But to get at the code in these directories, in the Subversion directory, we have to use a local Subversion client. Now there's many different clients that exist. For Windows, I prefer Tortoise Svn. For Macintosh, I prefer Smart Svn. I think it also runs on Linux. But you may find that you want to use a different client. It's kind of up to you. I don't really care. They're all pretty much the same with respect to functionality, and for this class they all have more than enough functionality for what you're going to need to do. So you can either use one of these tools or another one, as long as you find that you can efficiently get files and edit them and update them and so forth. So we'll bring up Tortoise Svn. Which we did right there. But before I do that, actually, what we need to do is click on this link here, which is the checkout link. Okay, and it's going to give you the URL that's needed to check out this project. Okay, and you can see that there's this first area that talks about project members who can authenticate over HTTPS. They can get the code with the ability to commit changes, and that's the one you want. Now they give you this long line that you can provide from the command line if you've got Subversion installed at the command line, and that will do it. But in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a GUI client, okay, where all I need from this long line is just that HTTPS URL that goes all the way to trunk. So I don't need this SVN checkout stuff at the beginning. I don't need the name of the project and the minus username stuff at the end. So I'm going to click copy, okay? And then I'm going to go to my Subversion client and I'm going to say that I want to check out a new version of the system. Okay, that brings up the following dialog box. I'm going to go out to quick checkout, and here's where I'm going to paste in that URL. Now notice that this is HTTPS. Okay, it's very important that the URL have that, because there's a very similar URL which is a little bit lower on the page called HTTP:. Okay, that URL can be used by anybody who has a Subversion client to check out the source code from this project, just like you'll be able to. But the difference is if you check out code with this HTTP URL, you're not going to be able to commit any changes back up to this repository. The only people who can commit changes back to the repository are those who have been identified as project members, or committers, excuse me, okay, with the commit role. And that's all of you guys, because I just added you. All right, so you're going to want to use the let me get back here. You're going to want to use this HTTPS URL. Okay, so we go back to our dialog, and it's going to, it's going to look differently depending on whether you're using Tortoise Svn or other places. In Tortoise Svn, generally, just a quick hint, the way you want to do it is you want to just in Windows create the directory in which you want to hold the files. Okay. Just create that using regular Windows Explorer or whatever you use. Then you right-click, you right-click on that folder icon, and it will pop up a menu which includes Tortoise Svn commands. Okay, and then you select the checkout command. Okay, in the Tortoise Svn submenu area, and that will bring up a dialog box where you enter all this stuff, and the outcome of doing the checkout will put all the stuff, the trunk stuff, into that particular directory. Okay, so in this case what I do is I bring up my tool, and then eventually, now at this point right now, I'm going to specify the local directory. Okay, so I bring up this and I'm going to say I want it in Johnson, and I'm actually going to create a new folder. This is pretty important. Whenever you check out code, you always want to put it into a brand new folder that has nothing in it. So what we're going to say is and the other convention is to always put it into a folder that has the same name as the project. Okay, that way I know it's a little more typing, but it stops you from being confused, and avoiding confusion is a very important part of this whole experience. Okay, so now we've got this new folder. Again, if Tortoise Svn, you probably created it before you even brought up the Tortoise Svn dialog, and by right-clicking you selected. But in this case, we bring up the tool and then we select the folder or local directory. So now we're saying we're going to check out the contents of the trunk of this project into this Robocode PMJ to Cruiser. Notice there's no spaces in our file path. Okay, you guys are getting better at it now. Okay, I haven't noticed it for at least a week, which is a good thing, but just to keep reminding you about that whole space in the file path. So I'm going to click continue. It brings up kind of a confirmation dialog which says I'm going to check out the trunk from this particular repository into this local directory, and I'm going to be fully recursive, which means all the folders and subfolders of that trunk directory are going to also be checked out, which is exactly what we want. Then we'll click finish. So it starts to crank away, and voila, we have already checked out. We have checked out this particular project. Okay. Now, because of the way that my Subversion client is set up, it did not ask me for a username or password. Okay, but in general, you're going to be prompted for a username and password at this point before it does the checkout. Let me explain where you get that from. Your username is going to be your Gmail account, okay, that you can see right here. Okay, your password is your Google account password. Now that is not the password that you use to log in. To get the Subversion password, which is different from your login password, you go to Profile, and then in your profile you go to Settings. And in the Settings area, you can see johnson.hawaii.edu's googlecode.com password, okay, Subversion password, is this long arbitrary string. And you can regenerate it to change it. And I will do that afterwards because obviously you're seeing my password right now. So I'll regenerate to get a different one. But this is not something that you can set yourself. It's auto-generated. So you'd select this, you'd type it in, you'd cut and paste it into the username password dialog box that will appear in your client, and then you're good to go. Okay? So going back to the Smart SVN client, we can now see that we've checked out, okay, if you look at this little thing here, and you saw that scrolling by, it's checked out all of these files into a directory. If we go to Johnson, we can now see that there is a robocode PMJ to cruiser directory, and inside it is all our files. Okay, what you also want to see is that there are in all of the folders and even in the subfolders, there's always going to be this .svn directory, which is a magic folder. You know, you can go inside to look at it, but don't touch anything in there. Okay, that provides Subversion information that helps it understand when things have changed and do diffs and all sorts of nice stuff. Okay, a very common mistake when you're taking files from one project and trying to add them to another project and stuff like that is to inadvertently copy a .subversion file from one project to another. If you do that, you're really in bad straits. Okay, because it's going to totally confuse Subversion. Your local area is going to get all corrupted. You're going to be very confused. Okay, and things will go dramatically bad. So one of the things when using Subversion, you have to be extremely careful to not touch these .svn directories, and also not inadvertently move them to someplace else where they're not supposed to be. Okay, so when you want to create new projects or copy code back and forth, here the simplest thing that I recommend you do is use our dist target, the ant-f dist.build.xml, on whatever your kind of source project is. That creates a zip file which contains no Subversion .svn directories. And remember, there's .svn directories in all the subdirectories. So there's one up here, excuse me, there's one here, there's one here, and as you get into more complicated package structures, you're going to find that there may be 10 or 15 different Subversion folders throughout your project. Okay, so you don't want to remove them manually. You might forget one, and things will be very bad. The best idea is to just run ant-f dist.build.xml, and then you'll create a zip file that's guaranteed to not have any .svn subdirectories, and then you can cut and copy stuff out of that area without any problem. Okay, let's go to Eclipse. And what I'm going to do is I got to delete this project. Okay, and now I'm going to import my newly checked out robocode PMJ to cruiser project. Oh, before I do that, actually, I have to remember a special thing to do. Whenever you check out a project, what's the first thing you do? Okay, whoops. The first thing you do is you go to it, you run ant. I'm so glad I remembered this. Okay, and what we're going to see is it's going to install Ivy, and it's going to install our third-party libraries, and then it will compile the system. Okay, and it compiled successfully, and as you'll see now, if we look, we now see there is a lib directory, which we didn't have before, and there's a build directory, which we didn't have before. Now, just to remind you, when our Subversion, our Google project hosting, okay, Subversion directory does not have the lib or build directories in it. Okay, so the repository never contains these things. We always build them and manage them locally. Okay, so now having done that, the next thing I always want to do when I've checked out a project that has been created in this class is to run verify. Okay, you not only want to do that the first time you check out a project, you want to do that every single time you get an updated version of a project. So let's say that you're working with 2 or 3 other people on a particular project, which is going to happen later in this semester. All of you are committing changes and adding enhancements and doing all sorts of great stuff, okay? In order to make sure that the development proceeds as fast as possible, okay, what you want to do is whenever you check out or whenever you make an update of your project to get the changes that other people have committed, you immediately run ant-f verify.build.xml. What does that do? That guarantees that if it passes without any errors, okay, that you now have a local version of the system which doesn't have any JavaDoc errors, which doesn't have any PMD errors, which doesn't have any check style errors, and for which all the JUnit tests pass. Okay? If that's so, now you make whatever changes you want to make. Okay? And you have to make sure before you commit your changes that you've got verify passing as well. Okay? On the other hand, if you make an update of the system, you update your local copy with changes from the repository, you run verify and it fails, what does that mean? That means that you need to contact your project members and say, hey, somebody else committed changes and verify doesn't pass anymore, so I'm not confident that my version of the system is correct. Furthermore, if I make further changes, I'm not going to really know whether I'm introducing new errors or not because it already doesn't pass. Okay? So we can see here that verify worked good. There were no find bugs there. There were no PMD errors. There were no check style errors. Okay? So now we can go into Eclipse and import this project, and we're safe in the knowledge that the project that we've downloaded from the system passes verify, so it doesn't have any quality assurance problems that at least we are aware of. Okay, so I'm going to select this. This is good, and we're going to say finish. Okay, so now I've got this Robocode PMJ to Cruiser project in Eclipse. Okay, now let's just take a look at let's say the check style target. Okay, and here's the check style target, and we're looking at this and we say, you know, it'd be really nice if we had a little more documentation for this. So we'll say runs check style and system using rules in lib/config files, detects any source file deviations from our coding standards. Okay? So we'll commit this change, and now the first thing I want you, we'll save this change, okay? And now I'm going to go back to my my Subversion client, and what we're going to notice is that, well, I just silently did something. This is a little button in Smart SVN which controls whether or not you display the files that are not under Subversion control or R. So when I click this, I see a whole bunch of other files. These turn out to be all the files that were created as part of my build process. You can see they're all in the lib directory or the build directory. Okay. And this can be very useful. This is a very useful button in general because it allows you to check to see whether or not, so if I select the build directory here, I see only the things in the build directory that were unversioned. If I click here, these are only the things in the lib directory that were unversioned. But if I click here, what I'll notice is there are none of these files with the little asterisk next to it, indicating that all of the files in my source directory are actually committed to or have been added to Subversion and exist in the repository as well. So this is a very important feature of and things you'll forget to do. Okay, so one of the most common things that'll happen when using Subversion is you'll make enhancements and changes, create some new files, you'll run verify, everything's good, you'll upload your changes, but you'll forget to do a Subversion add of a new file that you've created, like a Java file. The next person in your team comes along, they do an update, they run ant-f verify, they find that the system doesn't even compile anymore. Okay? The reason it doesn't compile is because you forgot to add a file that you'd created in the process of your development to the repository. Okay, so that's an important reason why running verify first off is so important, because it allows members that are getting updates from what other people have done to immediately check and make sure everything is consistent, everything's cool. Okay? So in this case, what will happen is they'll send out an email to the project mailing list and say, hey, you know, I can't even compile the system. Someone forgot to add a file that they'd created. And then you can go, you'll get that email, and you know, or they'll call you on the phone or whatever, and then you'll add the file, and then everything will be good. Okay? So, but I'm going to unclick this, because it then makes it easier to see that another feature of the client, of your Subversion local client, different clients do this in different ways, but this is the way that Smart SVN does it, is it shows you that there is one modified file. That means a file that's different in my local workspace than the copy that's found in the repository at Google Project Hosting. So the next thing we want to do is to be able to commit this change, which means to upload it to Google Project Hosting. Now, what did I say before that you should do every time before you commit changes? You should run verify. Okay? So we're going to go back here, and we're going to say ant-f verify. Okay, now you may be asking yourself, dude, that's crazy. All you did was update the documentation field of one of the build files. Why would you need to run verify again? Okay? To that I answer, it's those changes that you think can't possibly break anything that turn out with amazing frequency to break something. Okay, I don't know why this is. It's kind of some corollary to Murphy's Law. I don't even know. But there have been so many times where I have made a little change and thought to myself, I don't need to run verify, because I mean, there's just no way this thing could have broken anything. And lo and behold, it broke something. You know, I added some documentation. It turned out that I, you know, inserted an HTML tag, or the formatting was off, or I inadvertently deleted, you know, some element in my XML. Who knows what you could do? Okay, so the point being is, okay, it took me 53 more seconds to run verify and just convince myself that everything was good. If you do that, you're going to lose 53 seconds here or there, but in the long run, you're going to catch a lot of errors and speed the process of development. Okay, one of the things that you might be tempted to do at certain points is tell people verify doesn't work, verify doesn't you know, complete successfully, let's not worry about it. It's too stressful to get that thing to eliminate all those check style errors or find that stupid find bugs thing. Let's just blast ahead. Okay, if you do that, you may think that you're saving a little time, but you aren't. Okay, it's going to come back to haunt you. All right, this is one of those situations where a little bit more slowness at the beginning ends up being a whole lot more fastness at the end. Okay, because if you have a development process whereby each time you do an update and get code that's been changed by others, you know that you can run verify and it should work. Okay, that means that you always start off your session of hacking with a system that is unbroken. Okay, and that's an incredibly kind of confident place to be in, because then at any time during your session you can just run ant-f verify, and if something shows up, you know that was your mistake and it's your responsibility to fix. It's not anything anybody else did, it's what you did. Okay, so it gives you ownership over the mistakes that you make and allows you to very easily detect them. Okay, so I've run verify. This is sermoning, you know, I give it. Some people don't quite get it right away. Other people get it right away. I don't know which kind of person you're going to be, but I hope you do. Okay. So anyway, I'm going to now do this commit. I'm going to say click, continue, you know, in the fully recursive mode, which means it's going to search all of the subdirectories of this entire project to see if there's any files that need to be changed. It finds that there's check style, and we're going to say we improved the description field, and I'm going to click commit. Okay, and so you see it grinding away here, and the commit is finished. So what that means is if we go back to Robocode PMJ to Cruiser, okay, one of the things we can do is we can now click on the update, and we can see that just moments ago I committed revision number 69 with this particular comment, and I improved the description field in one way or another. Okay. Let's see. So that's that, and then also we can go to the source area. We can browse trunk, and we can see in check style. You can see that I now have our little change. Okay. So I think that concludes the basic process for checking out an existing project, running verify, making a small change, running verify again, and then committing it. Okay? One of your assignments for this module is to go through that exact process on this code, just like you've seen me do it. Find some other file to edit rather than check style. I don't, obviously don't have to do anything elaborate. Just change a Java doc or something. But make sure you run the verify and that everything's okay. All right. So now let's go to the kind of the final stage of this lecture, where what we're going to do is create a brand new project. Okay. So how do we do that? Well, the first thing we got to do is create it. And for that, we go to code.google.com/hosting, and we get to this page right here, and we're going to click on the create a new project. So for this project, I'm going to call it robocode pmj.deblaster. Okay, and I'm going to say it's a robocode robot that blasts other robots. Project description, this robocode robot sits there and blasts away at any other robots. The version control system that we're going to use is Subversion. Okay, they also have a distributed version control system, Mercurial, but we won't be using that in this class. I'm going to select a license. I'll have a lecture later on about licenses, but for now you can select Apache, or if you prefer another one, that's okay. I like to use Robocode as a project label so that other Robocode people can easily find it. And then I'm going to click Create. Okay, and there I have my brand new project. If we go to Administer Tab, now remember I said before that this should provide a description of the strategy. When I was creating the project, I just put something simple in there because that's not the most convenient place to edit it. But now we could go to the Administer page, and we could go ahead and use our Wiki Markup and make this better. So we will want to create a wiki pages for the user guide and the discussion guide, but I'm not going to talk about that today. We won't have any issues yet, but the main thing that we want to be able to do now is we want to add some files or set up a local workspace for this project, add some initial files, and get going. Okay, so to show you how that works, the best thing to do, or an easy way to get started, is to basically upload a template project, which in this case would be robocode pmj decruiser, commit those files as the initial set of files for Deblaster, and then we can add and subtract files later on to get things going. Okay, so how are we going to do that? All right, well, as I said before, one of the critical things that we want to do is avoid committing or adding .svn files. So we're going to make a distribution of the decruiser system in order to avoid that particular problem. There are many ways to go about doing this, but I'm going to show you what I consider to be kind of the easiest way to do it, and that is to start off by simply checking out the trunk directory, which contains nothing, right? So if we go to browse, we can see it's set up these subdirectories automatically, but the trunk directory contains nothing. So we're going to check out the trunk directory of our Deblaster project to our local workspace. Okay, so we're going to go through kind of a similar thing as to what we did before. We're going to say project checkout, quick checkout, put in the HTTPS URL of our Deblaster project, the trunk directory, and for our local directory, we're going to go up to my home thing and say make a new directory called robocode pmj deblaster. Now again, if you're using Tortoise Svn on Windows, the way you would do this, go to your home directory. Hopefully there's no spaces in that path. I forget on Windows 7, but I don't think there is. So go to a directory which contains no spaces in its path. Just use the Windows Explorer file system stuff to create a new folder called whatever your project name is, robocode xyz foobar. Once you've created that folder, then you right-click on it. That brings up a contextual menu for that folder, which will include some Tortoise Svn commands, including a checkout menu item. So you click the checkout menu item, and now you're going to be in the dialog for you'll be kind of at the same place we are here. Okay, so we've got that. It's going to ask if this is the fingerprint is correct. I guess it is. It's going to review my choices. I'm going to check out the trunk directory, which currently contains nothing from this repository into that thing, and we crank away. Okay, and now you can see we've checked out version 1. Again, you might be prompted for your username and password, in which case your username is going to be your Google account, okay, and your password for Subversion is found in your settings page. Okay, so there would be your account name, and then this would be the password. Again, I'm going to regenerate it after this lecture, so I'm going to change it, but for right now that's what it is. Okay, so now what you can see, if we go to the Finder, we have this robocode pmj deblaster, which is the trunk directory, corresponds to the trunk directory in the repository. All it's got is our .svn directory in there. There's nothing else. Okay, so how are we going to do this? Well, the thing we're going to do is I'm sitting here in the decruiser directory. I'm going to say ant -f dist.build.xml. I'm going to create a distribution. The reason why I'm doing that is I want to create a copy of my system that's got great features. One is it doesn't contain the lib directory, it doesn't contain the build directory, it doesn't contain the bin directory, okay, and it doesn't have any of those .svn directories. So we're going to go to build, we're going to go to dist, we're going to say ls, we're going to say jar -xf robocode, okay, and now you can see that we've got this directory that contains our stuff. Now there is one thing in here that we have that we don't really want to update or add to our new project, which is this jar file. So I'm going to get rid of it. I mean, if I inadvertently uploaded that, it's no big deal to delete it. Okay, but the main thing is I don't have a lib directory. That's good. I don't have the build directory. I don't have the bin. I don't have these .svns. Okay, so now what I want to do is go find all those files that I've created, which are in decruiser, build, dist, robocode. And I'm just going to select the whole shoot and match, and I'm going to say copy, and I'm going to go back to Johnson, and I'm going to paste it into my deblaster. Okay, so now you can see this is the .svn that Subversion put there, but now there's all these other files that I have, and you can notice, like for example, in the source directory there's no .svn, in the pmj directory there's no .svn. Okay, let's go back now to our client. Okay, and now if we click refresh, what we can see is that I have this, the unversioned file tab selected. We have all these files in here which are unversioned, but we want to now add them to the repository. Okay, so you use whatever it is that your repository provides. So for example, here I can click the source directory, I can click add, fully recursive, that adds a bunch of files. Then I could click here and select all these and do add. Okay, and now I can see that indeed my entire system appears to be all these local files have been added, kind of scheduled for for adding to the repository, I click the Commit tab, I click Continue. I scroll through to see what's in here, and I say, wait, that's not everything. So I click Cancel, and I realize that what I've got selected is the source directory. What I really want to have selected is this top level directory. So now I do Commit, Continue, and now I see, all right, that looks good. That looks like everything in the system. So I'm going to, as my commit message, I'll say initial update or initial commit of source files. This is template version based upon Robocode PMJ de Cruiser. Okay, so I'll click Commit. Okay, now it is nicely enough, it's asking me for my username and password. So I'm going to click what my username is. I'm going to go back here. I'm going to copy this, go back to SmartSVN, type it in, click Login. Okay, now you can see down here it's cruising through, adding all these files. Okay, and the commit is finished. So now if I go back to my Robocode PMJ to Blaster, which is right here, let's look at our updates, and we can see revision number 2 is the initial commit of all my source files. If I go to the source directory, click Browse, click Trunk, okay, there they all are. Okay, now again, remember, in your trunk directory, we don't want to see a directory called Robocode PMJ to Blaster with everything in it. We just want the trunk directory to contain the top level of our project. Then if we click Source, we see, Overview, etc. Now, the interesting thing, you will also notice that in my DeBlaster directory, if I click into source, you can see that a .svn folder has now been added, right? So once we svn add files or directories and svn commit them, okay, our local client will now put in these .svn folders to store information about the files. Okay, and there's a lot more about Subversion that I could go into, but I think for starters, I just want you to be able to do the very simple things, which means setting up a project, adding initial sets of files, being able to make changes, okay, to existing files and commit the changes. Adding and deleting files is just trivial. You just bring up your client and there's a delete and an add button for those two operations, and you should be good to go, at least to start making your way through the wonderful world of hosted projects. This is a wonderful thing. It's going to revolutionize your view of collaboration, not only with software, but really anything. If you're writing an English paper with other people, you could set up a project on Google Code and use Subversion to manage the contents of your English paper. Okay, and find that you can collaborate much better with your cohorts by doing something like that. I don't know what a verify task would look like for an English paper, but that would be a fun thing to think about. Okay, thanks a lot. See you next time.